Hello and welcome to part two of C Sharp. So today I'm going to actually be going over conditional statements, loopings, and arrays in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead and first section we'll be starting is conditionals and if statements. So conditionals and if statements are basically allowing you to tell the application to take a specific direction in the code if you want. So in this example, we have int x equals 35. So we have our data type, which is an integer. We have our variable name, which is x, our assignment operator, and we assign the value to 35. And then we have int y, and we assign that to 15. So in this conditional statement, we have if it if 20 is greater than 18, then we're going to console write line that this is true. So in this case, 20 is greater than 18, so this statement would run. We also have an if statement down here. If x is greater than y, now x is 35 and y is 15. That will run, indicating that this is true. Then we can also have what is called an else statement. An else statement is going to run if the above if statement returns false. So if x was not greater than y, then we would run our else statement indicating that it is false, and this statement will run if the if statement is false. So let me show you an example of how that works. Let's go to my code. So over here we can write a simple int x equals 15 int y equals 35. And we can do if x equals, or I'm sorry, if x is greater than 25, we can do something like that. And we'll go ahead and put this, make it a little bit easier to read for you guys. Console write line. This is true. We'll just put something simple like that. And we can simply run that statement, and it's going to run x is greater than 25, which it's not, so it's actually going to skip over this if statement. And it's just going to print out hello world. So let's go ahead and say if x is greater than 10, which that will return true, so this statement then will run that this is true. Right, there we go. It runs that this is true. Now let's go ahead and do x greater than y. Now y is 35 and x is 15, so that's obviously going to return false. We can have a simple else statement indicating that if that is not true, write line, return false. And then we can have something as simple as an else statement to indicate that it was false. And then this else statement will run. Right, and it returned false. So else statement ran indicating because the x is not greater than y is 35 and x is 15. So if statement returns false and the else statement gets ran. We can also do an else if you want to have more than one statement that can evaluate as true if y is less than x. Or we can do if x is less than y. Do it that way. So if x is less than y, which is true, and then we can do returns true, and then we can do a simple else afterwards, which will then indicate right. false. So we can have an if, an else if, another else if, another else if, as many else if statements as you want, indicating how many different directions you want your code to run. And then you can always end it with just a plain else statement at the end, which will run with if all the other if statements return false. Then your last else statement will then run, as it doesn't have any condition that it has to meet. So let's go ahead and run this. And our second else statement should run since x is less than 15. I'm sorry, x is less than 35, which is y. So it's going to return true. It's going to run that return true statement. So that's basically some examples of how if else statement will work. We can do let's see, string name equals James. It's another example. And now we can do if name equals James. Now, this statement's actually going to return false, and I'm going to show you why this will return false and not actually run that statement. So it's not going to print out this is true. It's going to return true because x is greater than y. But name does not equal James, and let me tell you why. Because the J is not capitalized. C# is case sensitive. So we're going to have to make it a capital J, indicating that name does equal James. And then in that case, it will run this is true, because then it now equals James. Notice that I have a double equal sign in here. Now the double equal sign is just comparing two values that they are equal. So it's just comparing if name, the variable, is going to be equal to the string James. So that's different than the single equal sign. The single equal sign is just assigning a value to the variable, whereas the double is comparing the two values. So let's go back to our slideshow. And like I said, here you can have multiple if statements, and you can also have multiple conditions inside one if statement. So in this case, we have if time equals 12, if time is greater or equal to 12, and time is less than 5. In this case, we use the double and sign to indicate and. Now, if time is greater or equal to 12 and time is less than 5. So both of these conditions will have to be true in order to run this else if statement. We can also do what is called an or statement. And an or statement is going to look something like if name equals James, or, and then you'll use the two parallel lines. If name equals David. So now you can do something as simple as that. Now this is saying if name equals James or name equals David. So any of these statements can run true, and then it's going to print this is true. So it's either one. So if name is James and name is not David, then it will run true. If name is not James and name is David, then it will run true. So as long as at least one of those is true, then the statement will run true. And we run this is true because name does equal James. Also, you can do more than just two statements. You can do if name equal James, or names equal David, or names equal something else, or name equal something else. You can have multiple conditions inside one if statement. And same with the and as well. So let's go to the what is called the ternary operator. So the ternary operator is very similar to what an if statement is, but if you want to do it on a single line, you can use what is called the ternary operator. So in this case, we have int time equals 12 string result equals if time is less than 12, it's going to print good morning by using this as the ternary operator, the question mark right here. If time is less than 12, it will print good morning. Otherwise, it will print good afternoon. And we have that colon there to separate it. So basically, it's like if its time is less than 12, good morning, else good afternoon. And then it will be print, and then it will display the final result in the variable result. So in this case, it's good afternoon. Good afternoon is the value that gets placed into the variable result. And the result will hold the value good afternoon in that case. All right, another way we can do this is what is called a switch statement. A switch statement is very common to use if you have multiple if statements and you don't want to run through dozens of if statements. You can do what is called a switch statement. A switch statement you can do like, let's say we have up here int day equals 3. Switch day. Now day equals 3, it's going to go through case 1, case 2, case 3. Since day equals 3, it's going to run case 3 and it's going to print console write line Wednesday. And then it runs this break statement right here, which is going to break out of the switch statement and come down here at the end of the code. So we have console write lines Wednesday. Now, if we change this to 5, it's going to come down to case 5 and run console write line Friday. And if we do case 1, it's going to go down to case 1 and print Monday. Or if we change this to 6, it'll go down to 6 and print out Saturday. So that is the basics of a switch statement. Very simple, pretty self-explanatory. I can go ahead and copy this in here. Let's go ahead and go to the code that I have up here. Let's go ahead and put this in here. And I'll show you an example of how that works. Okay, so now we have a switch statement in here, and it's pretty. Let's tap that over a little bit more. Tapping. A second. There goes. And then this has got to be changed to int 3. It's capitalized. All right. So let's go ahead and run that, and then we should print out Wednesday since it is printing out 3. And there you have it. We have Wednesday. And now you can see up here we have, S value is never used, the variable X assigned, but its value is never used. The variable Y is assigned, but its value is never used. So it's just indicating that we have not used these values now because I have removed the if and else statement. So these X and Y is not being used at all. And that's all it's showing you is that it's just a warning indicating that those are not being used. And then it prints out Wednesday like we have here. Day equals 3, runs to case 3, prints out Wednesday. All right, so let's move on to looping. So here we have a while loop and a do while loop. So a while loop syntax is going to look like this. So in this case, we have int number equals 10. We have while number is less than 35, and it's going to print out number. So number is 10. So as long as the number is less than 35, we'll run this while loop. So number is less than 35. It's going to print out console write line number, which is 10. And then it's going to add 1 to number by using the plus plus. What the plus plus does is that's going to it's going to increment number by 1. So number is now equal to 11. And it will come back up here again. Number is still less than 35. Then it'll print out number again, which is 11. It's going to add 1 to number. Number is now 12. Still less than 35. It's going to print out 12. Add 1 to number again. Number is 13. It's going to print out number 13. Number is still less than 35. And then it's going to do it again. until we get to 35. Once number is 35, number is no longer less than 35, then we will cancel out of the while loop and continue the rest of the code. Let me show you how that works in our code up here. So let's go ahead and get rid of, I'm going to get rid of this hello world down here. So I don't need that. And then I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of this right here. We don't need that either. And I'm going to put a while loop in there. All right, so now we have our while loop. Int number equals 10. Oops. All right. So int number equals 10. And now let me show you how that's going to work. It's going to print out 10 all the way to 34. It should print out 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, all the way to 34 once I run it. Ooh, and it looks like we've got an error. It says expected a semicolon, and that is on line 7. I don't think we need a semicolon there. Why is it not liking it? Oh, that's why. It's probably because while wasn't cap or while was lowercase. All right, let's get back to what I was doing. All right, so it should print out 10 through 34. So it's right. All right, there we go. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, all the way to 34. It's not going to print out 35 because once number equals 35, it's no longer less than 35. So it's not going to run the number again, and it will cancel out. And it will come down here and go do the rest of the code, which is what it did here and printed out Wednesday. So let's see what happens if we get rid of this. Now number will not increment by 1, and number will always remain 10, and it will always be less than 35. So in that case, we're going to have what is called an infinite loop. With no way to stop the loop, it's going to continue running 10 all the way down, and it's not going to stop. It will keep on going. So you want to make sure that you're not going to have an infinite loop, and there's a way to prevent it from doing that and creating an infinite loop. So what you can also do is like, let's say we put number plus plus in here, plus plus in here. You can do what is called, let's say we do if number equals 22. Break. All right, so now if number equals 22, it's going to break. And what a break does is that's going to break execution of the loop, and then it will come down here and run the switch statement. So in this case, it's going to print 10 to 22 because it's going to break at 22 rather than to continue going like it was. So that's another way what you can do to stop the while loop, as it breaks at 22 and it continues the statement and prints Wednesday out. So that's the basics of using a while loop. Pretty simple. And now let's look at a do while loop. A do while loop is very similar to a while loop. Only difference is it's pretty much backwards. So let's copy that out, put that in here. Now we have a do while loop. Give me 1 second. I don't have the was number equals 10. Number equals 10. I'll just put that in there. Oops. All right, so int number equals 10. So the only difference is it's backwards. We have the condition down at the bottom rather than at the top. So in this case, we're going to run through the loop before it even tests the condition to see whether it's true or false. And it's going to start at 10 and it's going to print all the way to, I believe, 35 this time because we got no, 34. I was wrong. So 10, 12, 13, yeah, 34 because number's 34, 34, and then, okay, so that makes sense. Okay, so once it gets to 34 here, 34 is less than 35. It's going to come back around, print 34 out, add to 35, and then number is no longer less than 35, and then it will continue on. Now let's see what happens if we put this right above it. That way, it's going to increment at the beginning and it will start with printing out 11 rather than 10, because this case, we're going to add 1 to number before we print it out. So this case, we're going to have 11 to 35 this time. And that's a do-while loop. Very simple on how that actually works. So let's go back. Now let's look at a for loop. A for loop is pretty simple. It's easy to increment or to run through a whole set of values or list like an array. So let me show you an example of how the for loop is going to work. I'm going to print this, or I'm going to copy this out and throw this over here. All right, so let's say we have a for loop here. Oh, that's in copyright. Let me do that again. Yeah. Base. All right, so we got our for loop here. Just gotta change a few things. And I'm actually using careful line as well. So we have int number equals 10. For I equals 0, I is less than or equal to 10, I equals I plus 2. But in this case, we're going to just do I plus plus. All right, so, and we'll get rid of, no, I'll go with that right now. So, it's going to start out with creating a variable, which is I equals 0. And then it's going to be I is less than or equal to 10, and I plus plus. So, I equals 0, which is less than or equal to 10. And then it's going to come down here. I is not equal to 3, so we'll skip this if statement. And then it'll print out I, which is 0. We'll come back up here. We're going to add 1 to I equals 1. 1 is still less than or equal to 10. I does not equal 3 yet. And we'll come down here and we'll print out 1. And we'll come back up here and do it again. I is now 2. 2 is less than or equal to 10. I does not equal 3, and we'll print out 2. Then we'll come up here again. I equals 3. 3 is less than or equal to 10. I now equals 3. And then we'll break out of the for loop and come down to the switch statement. And that is basically how for loop will work. So now we have 0, 1, 2, and Wednesday. So that's all it's doing there. And we can also put number in here instead if we want, because number equals 10, and it's still going to print out the same result. All right, and there you have it. That's a for loop. Pretty simple, or we can just get rid of this altogether right here. Oops, my mouse is screwed up. All right, and put number right on there. And then that way it will print out 0 through 9. I believe. Yep, 0, or I'm sorry, 0 through 10. Oh, because number is less than or equal to 10. That's right. So that's why it's going to print out 0 through 10. Because I starts at 0, and then it increments until I is less than or equal to 10. And then once I is 11, which is no longer less than or equal to 10, then we come down and we run the switch statement. All right, so that's a basic for loop. Pretty simple. All right, so you've seen how the break statement works, but let me show you how a continue statement works. So if I equals 5, we're going to add a continue statement. So what a continue statement does is that's going to continue execution of the loop. It's going to stop where it's at. It's going to come back up here and continue. So once I equals 5, it's going to run in here and continue. And instead of coming down here to print out 5, it's going to come up here again, and then it's going to add 1 to I, and I is going to equal 6, and then I will equal 6, and it'll come down and print out 6. So basically, the continue statement is going to continue from where it tells it to continue, and it's going to continue execution of the loop. So in this case, we'll actually skip the number 5, because 5 isn't going to get printed out, because it continues when I equals 5. So it's going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. As it skips the number 5, as it doesn't get that one printed out here. All right, I hope that makes sense to everyone who's watching. All right. And if something doesn't make sense, feel free to leave comments as well. All right, let's take a look at arrays. So arrays are very common in programming, and you should not write an array. So an array is a way to hold a collection of values into one variable. So in this case, we have string names, and we start with the bracket, or I'm sorry, we start with the variable name, and then we end it with brackets, indicating that this is an array. So the variable names holds David, John, Ashley, and Jessica are the 4 names that are inside of the array names. Now each index and each value in an array is represented by an index. So they all start at 0 though. So David is represented by the 0th index. John is the first index. Ashley is the second index. And Jessica is the third index. Just like I have shown down here. David 0, John 1, Ashley 2, and Jessica 3. Now, if we want to do an array of integers, it would be something like this. Very similar to what I have up here. But in this case, we would use int, use the brackets, and then we do 10, 15, 35, 40, or whatever integers that needs to be in there. And then you can print it out. Console write line names, and we're going to get the 0th index, which is going to print David, which is the 0th index. And then ages, it's going to print out the 3rd index with 0, 1, 2, 3, which would be 40. So this is actually incorrect here. This should be 40 and not 35. So the 3rd index is 40 on the array list. So let me show you how to actually do that in code and show you how that actually works. Go ahead and copy. Go back to the, let's go back to here. Get rid of this switch statement. No, I don't need this actually. Now we'll get rid of this too. Damn it. All right, so now we have all right, so let's go ahead and do I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this right here because this setup pages equals equals, and why are you not liking these? Oh, I don't want wrong quotes being used for it. All right, there we go. All right, so now this should print out like I have shown here. Let's go ahead and run that. All right, and we got David and we got 40. All right, so that's gonna be the basics of printing out or using an array. So let's say we wanted to, here's another way we can create an array. We can do int, we'll just call it numbers equals new int, and we can create. So here's another way to create an array. This way, we don't even have the variables assigned yet, but we know that this array is going to contain 10 indexes or 10 elements because we have 10 in here. And in this case, our variable name is numbers, our array name. We have the brackets after our first variable, and then we got to equal it to new int. And then inside the brackets at the end, we'll put the number of elements in the array. Now let me show you how we can loop that around in a for loop. Let's do for int I equals 0. I is less than 10. I plus plus. All right. So let me show you how this is going to work. All right. So let's say we wanted to print out each, let's say we wanted to assign a value to each number in the array. We can do numbers, and then we can open the array and we'll put I in there because I is the variable name, I here, which equals 0. So at first it's going to get the 0th index of the array. And we're going to add it equal to I plus 3. All right, so what's going to happen in this, we'll go ahead and print out, so right line numbers I. So it's going to assign a value to each index in the array. So the first index is the 0th index, as we're going to have here I equals 0. So I is 0. So we're going to get the 0th index. And it's going to be I plus 3, which is 0 plus 3. So the 0th index is going to equal 3. And then we're going to come back around. I is now 1. Now we go to the first index, and the first index is 1 plus 3, which is 4. And then we'll come back around. I is now 2. Go to the second index, which is 2 plus 3, which is 5. And then we'll go print that out. Go to the third index. Well, I will equal 3. We're at the third index because now I equals 3. 3 plus 3 is 6, and then we'll print out 6. So that's an easy way to assign values to all the integers in the array, is one way that you can do that. And then that'll print out each one, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. It would be a lot simpler to do it that way instead of going like this, equals 5, and then numbers 1 equals 10. And this is another way that you can assign each value as well for each index in the array. But this way uses a little bit more code, and it can be more beneficial to use it in a for loop to assign each value rather than assigning each one individually. Like that. In a for loop, all you're using is just these two lines here. Makes it a lot simpler because now each value each one has a value. So now if I were to print out number, whoops, console write line, and we'll print out 6. And that will just print out 6. And I'll just go ahead and get rid of this. And there you have it. Prints out what number 6 is, which is 9. Now let's say I did not assign it. Now let's see what happens if I get rid of that and then I go to try to print out 6. All right, now you can see that all it's going to print out is 0 since there's nothing valid in the index. Then it prints out David and then 40. So it's just going to print out 0 as there's nothing valid unless you assign it something. And then it will print out the assigned value. One thing that you do want to be cautious of when you're working with for loops is to not do something like this. This right here is going to cause a runtime exception. And the runtime exception that it will cause is that the index is outside the bounds of the array. And I'll show you that here. Unhandled exception. Index was outside the bounds of the array. So what that means is that we're trying to assign values to the array that doesn't exist. So there's only 10 elements in this array. And now I is less than 15. So once I equals 11, because 11 is less than 15, it's going to come down here and it's going to put 11 in here. But there's no 11th index. It only goes up to 10. So when that happens, and it gets to 11, it's going to throw this exception saying index was outside the bounds of the array because there's no 11th index. So that's what's going to happen. So that's what you need. So that's one thing that you need to be cautious about when you're working with a for loop and arrays. Is you don't want to go above the index in the array. That can cause that exception. And let's get back to 10, and then it should print out just fine. And there you go. All right, so let's move on to more on arrays. Okay, so like I showed you before, is you can assign arrays. Like this, you have int ages 10, 15, 35, 40. And you can also reassign. So like here I have ages, and then the second index, which is 35, but I'm reassigning it to 22. So now the array ages is going to be 10, 15, 22, and 40. So now when I print it out, it's going to print out 22 if I print out the second index because it was reassigned, which you can do that. Console write line, you can also do ages length. So what that is doing is that is giving you the length of the array. So the length of the array is 4. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how many elements are in the array. There's 4 elements in the array. Even if you start at the 0 index 0, 1, 2, 3, there's still a total of 4 elements in there. So if we call the length property, it's going to print out 4. So you can do ages, which is the name of the variable, dot length is called the length property to get the length of the array. And then like you can also do that in the for loop to avoid the index outside the bounds of the array. What you can do is you can just do ages length, which would get the length of the array. So you know that it's not going to go outside the bounds of the array because you're getting the length, which is 4. So I is less than 4. And then I'll print it out 0, 1, 2, 3, indicating that, it's not going to go past the index. All right. One thing that you can also do is write a for each loop. A for each loop is one way that you can avoid the exception. Let me show you an example of using a for each loop. Let's go back. Now let's go over here and I will show you a for each loop. So a for each loop is going to look similar to like that. Now I'm doing int I equals ages. So what's happening is it's going to print out the value of ages for each one in the array. So ages has 10, 15, 35, and 40. So it's going to take the first index of the array in ages, and it's going to pass it into I. So the first, or I'm sorry, it's going to take the 0th index, and it's going to pass it into I, which is 10. And then it's going to take it and print out I, which is 10. And then it's going to come back around up here and print out the second, or the first index in the array, which is 15. Pass that into I, and then print out 15. And then it's going to take the second index, which is 35, pass that into I, and then print that out. And then it'll take the last index, which is 40, pass that into I, and print it out. So there's basically no way that it can go past the amount that's in the array because it's all automatically going to stop at the last index of the array because that's all that's going to be passed in there into the next variable and then print it out. So it's not going to, so you don't have to worry about that exception. So that's the nice thing about a for each loop. Plus, you don't even have to use integers. You can use any type of variable type that you're using to run through a list, an array, strings, of whatever that needs to be done. So you can also, like, you change it to like string if you wanted to use string or something. And it'd be string I and ages. Now you're probably wondering why I'm getting an error. The only reason I'm getting that error is because ages is an int and not a string. So that's why it's underlined. Just telling you that's an error. So that is some of the basics of a for each loop. Pretty simple on that. So let's go to even more on arrays. So there are some different methods that you can use to manipulate how an array is going to work or look. So like we have string names, David, John, Ashley, and Jessica. We can use the sort method by saying array dot sort, which is going to call the method from the array class. It's going to call the method sort, and it's going to, inside sort, we're going to put in our array, which is names, and then it's going to sort the names in alphabetical order. So, and then we can print them out in a for each loop, and then it'll print it out in alphabetical order. So since we sorted it, so the first one that's going to take from names and print out and to pass into I would be Ashley. Because that's the first, because that starts with an A, and that's the first name in the alphabetical order. And then it's going to take the second one, which is David. I'm sorry, the first index, which is David. Pass that into I, then I'll print out David. So what you would print out is it'd be Ashley, David, then it would be Jessica, then John, is how it'd print out. Now, if you wanted to do that with, I'm sorry, let's go back. Oops, I went a little farther. Now, if you want to do that with integers, the only difference would be is that it would be putting them in sequential order. So if you wanted to sort ages, you can do that, and it would come back as 10, 15, 22, and 40. Well, it's already kind of sorted. But if it wasn't sorted, it would print it out as in sequential order. All right. Other ways to create an array, like I showed you before, and so you can do like string names, and then you can put all the indexes out, reach value in the array, or you can do it this way with names equals new string, and then you put the amount that's in the array, and then assign the values this way, or assign them in a for loop, or in a loop to assign them. All right, multi-dimensional arrays. So you can have more than one dimensional array, which can get kind of confusing. So if we had like a two-dimensional array, you would start with doing like a comma. So a two-dimensional array is going to look something like, let's see. I will start out with showing you a two-dimensional array with new ages 5 and 10. So this is a two-dimensional array. So in a two-dimensional array, why is that not liking that? Hmm. Ever type ages, two ages. Why are you not liking that? Give me 1 second. Hmm. 1 second. Okay, I must be writing it wrong or something. I might be drawing a blank here. Oh, I see what I'm doing wrong. That's the problem. Okay, so yeah, I get confused with that sometimes. So it should be not new ages, new int. That's my mistake. All right, so let's see. Put the comma there. So this is a multi-dimensional array. So in a multi-dimensional array, you can put a comma in there. This is a two-dimensional array, and then you would have 5 and 10. So in a two-dimensional array, you can do something like ages 0, 0 equals 10. Ages 0, 1 equals 15. Ages 0, whoops, and then 0, like 2 equals 25, and then ages like 0, 3 equals 35, and so forth. And then you can start by doing like ages 1, 0 equals 35. So these are all different like dimensions. So you have 0. So for all the 0 index of the first one, you could do 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10. And then you'd start with the first index, and then that would go all the way up to 10 as well. So it's something, so it's going to be pretty much like that when you're doing an array. Now, if you wanted to pass through like a multi-dimensional or to assign values to a multi-dimensional array, then you're going to need to use something like a for loop. And to do a for loop with that, you would do like for int I equals 0. I is less than 5, because that's going to be the first one. I plus plus. And now we'll do a second for loop. And this one will be int j equals 0. J is less than 10. J plus plus. So the first for loop is for the first indexes. The second for loop is for the second one. This one's less than 5. That one's less than 10. So let's say we want to assign a value to the for loop or to the array. We can go in here and we can do console write line ages I ages j. Oh, that's really cool. All right, so it's going to look like that. So index I and index j. So it's going to come down here. It's going to take 0, and then it's going to come in here, and it's going to use the I0. And then it's going to loop around this loop 10 times, and then it's going to assign the variables that way. So I is 0, and then we come into the second for loop, j is 0, and then we're going to loop around this loop 10 times while I is still 0. We're going to loop around this 10 times. J is 0, J is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Once that completes, we'll come back around, back to the outer loop, and then I will now equal 1. And then we'll assign 1 to I, and then we'll loop around this loop again 10 times while I is 1. And then it'll keep on doing that until it goes through the entire array of indexes. I'm going to change this because I had that wrong too. This should be like that. So that's basically how you're going to use a two-dimensional array. Now, I'll probably get an exception when I run this because I didn't assign any of the values to any of those. Yeah, wrong number. So yeah, so I didn't assign the values. You have to assign the values to all of them. So like try to do like pages I j equals j. Oops. Wrong number of indices inside expected 2. Let's see here. Where did I make the mistake? The 28. Oh, that's wrong. That's why. This down here, let's get rid of that. Let's try it again. Okay. There we go. And then it prints out the last one. So we got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9. 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because there's 5 in there, and then for each one. So that is a two-dimensional array of how to use and assign values to a two-dimensional array. So let me go back. And then there are not only two-dimensional arrays, there's 3 dimensions, there's 4 dimensions, and it's going to look something like this. And then 5 dimensions, and you can have up to 32 dimensions. Yeah, very confusing. I know, it can get pretty intimidating. All right, and here's an example of a two-dimensional array like I showed you. That's 3 down and 2 across. And then we have jagged arrays. Now, a jagged array is an array of arrays. So you're basically having arrays inside of another array. And yeah, that can even, and you can even store up to two-dimensional arrays and jagged arrays, which can be very intimidating and confusing. So I'm not going to go into writing jagged arrays or anything on there, but that's an example of jagged arrays, and there's a lot of examples online to if you want to learn more on jagged arrays. So that is going to complete the video today, and I hope you enjoyed and learned some things today. And there will be more videos coming up, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to listen and watch. Thank you.